As you know, the president has dispatched Chris Kobach, the Attorney General for the state of Kansas, to head up a panel to look into voter fraud. And this, of course, I personally think is long overdue, if for no other reason, just to settle the issue. And Chris Kobach, we've had on the show many times before. He's a pretty tough guy. Obviously got a point of view. He believes that there's massive voter fraud out there, and he's not alone. But it's interesting that now the spotlight is showing up on various states. There's been a lot of pushback in some states who won't cooperate with the Chris Kobach panel. It'll be interesting to see what happens here in California. But with us right now is the senior Judicial Watch attorney, and he says that California's voter rolls are rotten to the core. Let's talk with Bob Popper. Bob, how are you?
I'm very well. How are you?
I'm fine. Thanks for coming on with us. So talk to us about California.
Well, look, the problem in California is compliance with the National Voter Registration Act. Okay, and in a way, we need to keep this discussion separate from discussions about, for example, voter ID, where you're trying to, determine if the state can pass a law that requires what kind of ID at the polls and so on. Look, the NVRA is a federal law that they passed in 1993, and it requires states to clean up their voter rolls. Okay, so that assessment has already been made that was a good thing. And, at the time that the NVRA was passed...
That's the National Voter Registration Act.
Yeah. Should I go with the long name each time or the short name?
Well, I just want to emphasize so that people don't know what the acronym is.
Yeah, no, I go all lawyer sometimes, and that happens.
That's okay.
Look, at the time it was a compromise bill. There was greater access through the motor voter portions, which everyone is more familiar with. And at the same time, there was an emphasis on election integrity. Well, we sent a letter to California and 11 counties in California, including some of the biggest, and we told them that they had registration rates exceeding 100%. And what that means is they have more voter registrations than they have citizens over the age of 18 who could register. That's usually an indication of a problem. And, the more we dug into it, we base this on a report, a federal report that comes out every 2 years. It came out this past July. But the more we dug into it and we called some of these counties, they not only confirmed our numbers, they exceeded our numbers when we got, the absolute most recent data. And, for the winner so far has been Los Angeles County, which has a registration rate of 144%.
Okay, so you got 144% more. You got 144%
of the citizen voting age population times 1.44.
Got it. Okay. So now this is a very mobile society in California, but specifically Southern Cal. A lot of people come out here to chase dreams, and some make it, a lot don't, and they leave. So is that one of the animating forces here, that people register to vote when they're in California and then they move back to Ohio or wherever they came from, but they never change their voter registration, or they're still listed on the voter rolls in California even though they're not here anymore?
Absolutely. Look, that's the story everywhere. People move, they don't cancel their old registration. That's how you get, that if the voter rolls were pristine and accurate today, people would die, people would move inside of a month, inside of a year, they'd be going bad. And that's why states have to stay on top of them. There's a couple good reasons to do this. The primary one, from my point of view, is that it's federal law. And you can't pass a compromise bill and then attack half the compromise, and not enforce it. But aside from that, you can have a special kind of voter fraud where someone votes their old registration. And bear in mind, and this happens, but bear in mind, this is not like, voting under someone else's name or voting under the name of someone who has died. What this means is someone who is registered in California, then goes and resides in Nevada. Then they go back and vote their California registration. They could even do that by mail. Yeah. While they're also voting in Nevada. I mean, that's one thing you got to watch out for. And the other is there are just a lot of consequences to having an ugly or a rotten voter roll. And one of them is, get out the vote efforts. Rely on voter registration lists. And if you're contacting people, and in some case, the worst case that I've ever seen was a state where 1/3 of its registrations were inactive, and so who knows how many of them had moved to other states. If you're contacting that many people, and that's the rate at which you're, getting your swings and misses, that's your whiff rate, that's expensive.
Yeah, it's not only that, it also opens up the window to corruption and voter fraud, because if you have a lot of essentially, because I realized I moved here from New York 32 years ago, and I didn't change my voter registration. I registered to vote in California. I didn't notify New York I wasn't a resident anymore. So theoretically, if somebody had nefarious purposes to meddle in an election, an absent voter and a voter who is no longer living there is just sort of this open invitation for voter fraud if they can figure out how to do it.
Well, there is. And, despite the fact that you and I are talking about things that everyone does and that happen everywhere, I mean, I do want to emphasize that the situation in California is an outlier. There are about 3,000 counties in the United States. In 2015, after the last release of federal records and information, there were about 300 where the registration rate exceeded the citizen voting age population. This time around, there are 470. So it's getting worse. But these, you're still an outlier if you're one of the 470, and you're particularly an outlier. I don't think I've seen in the entire country a number that exceeds 144%.
Well, it's all fascinating stuff. Thanks for bringing it to our attention, and we always appreciate what Judicial Watch does. Bob Popper is a senior Judicial Watch attorney. Judicial Watch is a website that everybody should be flagging. Thanks so much for being with us, Bob. Appreciate it.